Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and this is Voice of the Global South. All right then, let's get started on the show this week. No Ukraine deal as Trump and Putin wrap up summit. Will peace be given a chance? Two Chinese ships collide during a high-speed chase of a Philippines boat, leave Beijing red-faced. And India joins the race for transporting solar energy via an undersea cable. All that and much, much more coming up on Voice of the Global South. It was billed as a pivotal moment to address the Ukraine conflict and reset US-Russia relations. But the much-anticipated high-stakes Trump-Putin summit ended without a deal, leaving the world grappling with uncertainty about the path to peace in Ukraine. So what went wrong? Everything and nothing, really. They came, they saw, but they didn't exactly concur. They broke the ice, though, and to that extent, it is a start. Here's what happened, how it all unfolded, what the leaders said, and what it means for Ukraine and global stability. The choice of Anchorage in the U.S. state of Alaska as the venue was laden with symbolism. Once part of the Russian Empire until it sailed to the U.S. in 1867, Alaska represents a unique geopolitical crossroads where East meets West. The summit took place at a U.S. military facility in the city. The base, home to advanced F-22 Raptor squadrons and a key intercept point for Russian aircraft probing U.S. airspace, served as a reminder of the delicate balance of power between the two countries. The summit began with Trump personally greeting Putin on the tarmac in a carefully choreographed red carpet ceremony. The two leaders, who last met in person in 2019, shook hands as they sought to project a veneer of cordiality despite the underlying tensions. Trump tapped Putin on the elbow and hand before posing for cameras. U.S. fighter aircraft flew overhead as Putin made his way to a ramp where he again shook hands with Trump. The two posed for more photographs as reporters shouted out questions. One yelled whether Putin would still be killing civilians. But the Russian president pointed to his ear and shook his head that he could not hear. Trump then gestured for Putin to walk with him. The Russian presidential limousine, the Oris Senate, stood nearby, and then the world witnessed something extraordinary. Putin was suddenly seen slipping into the back of Trump's presidential limousine, nicknamed the Beast. They exchanged a few words. It was their first in-person talk in 6 years, and it took place outside the earshot of the aides, media, and other officials. The Russian leader was captured by the camera smiling through the window as the vehicle pulled away. The short ride from the tarmac to the summit venue took less than 10 minutes, but it gave both leaders the chance for the most private of conversations at a meeting the whole world was watching and studying intensely. Then came another twist. A one-on-one meeting between Trump and Putin did not take place as initially planned. Instead, Trump and Putin walked into the room accompanied by two aides each, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov on the Russian side, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff on the American side. Now, that was not all. The summit broke up ahead of schedule. Russian officials had said that they expected the talks to last 6 or 7 hours, but an extended second session of talks did not take place. The summit, lasting nearly 3 hours, yielded no major agreement. Both leaders emerged for a joint press conference where they described the discussions as productive, but stopped short of announcing a deal.
And we agreed on a lot of points. I mean, a lot of points we're agreed on. But there's not that much. There's, one or two pretty significant items, but I think they can be reached. Now it's really up to President Zelensky to get it done. And I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit.
Putin, in turn, said that the talks laid the groundwork for future negotiations.
As is known, Russian-American summits have not been held for more than 4 years. This is a long time. The past period was very difficult for bilateral relations. And let's be honest, they have slid to the lowest point since the Cold War. And this is not good for our countries, or the world as a whole. Obviously, sooner or later, it was necessary to correct the situation, to move from confrontation to dialogue. And in this regard, a personal meeting of the heads of the two states was really overdue, of course with the condition of serious, painstaking preparation, and this work was generally done.
Now, as it happens at summits of this nature, what the leaders don't say, what they leave unsaid, sometimes makes more news than what they let on. And that was the case with this summit too. Western media was quick to pounce on the omission of the word ceasefire from Trump and Putin's remarks at their joint news conference. Trump-Putin summit ends without concrete deal, screamed the headline on CNN. Trump-Putin break-off summit with no Ukraine deal as talks end early, read the Washington Post. The NYT, the BBC and the Financial Times all echoed similar sentiments. Clearly, the summit's most significant outcome was its lack of one. No ceasefire agreement was reached. The thorny issue of territorial concessions, particularly Russia's control of nearly 20% of Ukrainian territory, including Crimea and parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson, remained unresolved. But despite the deadlock, both leaders described the talks as a foundation for future negotiations. Trump hinted at a follow-up summit that would include Zelensky potentially expanding the dialogue to other European leaders as well. For his part, Putin viewed the summit as a diplomatic coup of sorts, which reinforced Russia's status as a global player. Analysts suggested that Putin may be stalling or buying time as Russian forces continue to make incremental gains in Donbas region, potentially strengthening Moscow's position in future talks. So, where does it leave Ukraine? Ukraine remains adamant that any peace deal must include robust security guarantees against future Russian aggression. It's a demand that its Western allies have been reluctant to meet with military commitments. Trump has, in a sense, lobbed the ball into Ukraine's court, saying that it is now up to Zelensky to strike a deal with Putin. Globally, the summit underscores the fragility of the current world order. Putin's demands, particularly Ukraine's exclusion from NATO, challenge the Western alliance's cohesion. European leaders fear that a US-Russia deal could undermine international law and embolden other authoritarian regimes. Some questions remain though. Can the US and Russia strike a grand bargain? Can Trump wean Putin away from Xi Jinping's China? And how will a potential Russia-US rapprochement benefit India? For instance, can India continue buying Russian oil without inviting US sanctions? Can India expect Trump to relax certain tariffs that he imposed on it? There are no easy answers just yet. As Russia's ambassador to the US, Alexander Dachiev, said, Moscow and Washington, D.C. have a huge toxic legacy from the previous US government that needs to be overcome. And it won't happen overnight. It will take time, but the ball has been set rolling for a reset in ties. As the world digests its summit's outcome, the path to peace in Ukraine and by extension the world at large remains elusive though. Trump's ambition to broker a deal is clear. He has his eyes set firmly on a Nobel Peace Prize. But for Trump, the gap between Russia's demands and Ukraine's red lines is vast. Trump, who said during his presidential campaign that he would end the Ukraine war within 24 hours, now concedes that it has proven to be a tougher task than he expected. The summit may have opened a channel for dialogue, but without Ukraine at the table, any agreement risks being seen as illegitimate. For now, the war grinds on with fresh Russian drone strikes and Ukrainian counterattacks reported overnight. So, will Trump's next meeting, potentially with Zelensky and Putin, bridge the divide? For Ukraine and the world, the stakes could not be higher. In the Indo-Pacific, a dramatic collision between the two Chinese ships chasing a Philippines boat embarrasses Beijing and exposes chinks in China's armor. The incident reveals operational blunders that have led China red-faced amid escalating tensions in the contested waters that separate it from the Philippines. Ragini Sudhir Chaure has more.
South China Sea tensions are rising once again. Only this time, it's not between China and the Philippines, but Chinese fighting among themselves. A dramatic collision between two Chinese vessels near the Scarborough Shoal in the West Philippine Sea is raising serious questions about Beijing's control and coordination in one of the most volatile maritime regions in the world. What happened? Why did two Chinese ships collide with each other? What does this loss of face mean for China? It was a Monday morning near the Scarborough Shoal, known in the Philippines as Bajo de Masinloc. Two Chinese vessels, one from the China Coast Guard, the other a guided missile destroyer from the People's Liberation Army Navy, collided during a tense confrontation with the Philippine ships. The China Coast Guard vessel was chasing a Philippine Coast Guard ship when it rammed into the PLA Navy warship. Footage released by the Philippine Coast Guard shows the moments leading up to the impact. Water cannons firing, tight maneuvers, and an apparent error in judgment, which led to the China Coast Guard vessel slamming bow first into the rear of the Chinese Navy warship. Was this a simple accident? A symptom of something deeper? Or possibly a breakdown in communication between China's maritime forces? So far, China has not confirmed the collision publicly. The China Coast Guard acknowledged trying to expel the Philippine vessel but made no mention of the accident itself. Its spokesperson called China's actions professional, standardized, legitimate, and legal. But why radio silence on a collision between two of its own ships? It was not an isolated incident. Since 2021, there have been at least 7 documented collisions involving China Coast Guard vessels and Philippine vessels. The Scarborough Shoal, a cluster of rocks and reefs, is among the most hotly contested maritime flashpoints in the South China Sea. China took de facto control of the shoal in 2012, despite it falling with the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. The presence of a Chinese warship alongside a China Coast Guard ship raises the alarm. The Navy typically stays back, leaving enforcement to the Coast Guard. So why was a Chinese warship chasing down Philippine fishing boats? The Philippine government isn't backing down. The Philippine Coast Guard says that its vessels were on a routine mission, escorting a fishing carrier and 35 boats as part of an economic supportive initiative. Fuel and supplies were being delivered, and yet they were met with water cannons and a high-speed chase. President Ferdinand Marcos responded with defiance. He said, quote, "I would never instruct any of our vessels to back out. But how far is Manila willing to go? And more importantly, how far is Beijing willing to push?" Military analysts say that the 11th August incident could prompt Beijing to ramp up patrols across other strategic areas such as Second Thomas Shoal and Sabina Shoal, regions already under immense pressure. They warn that the collision highlights a lack of coordination between the Chinese Navy and the China Coast Guard, two forces with different missions but increasingly overlapping operations. One expert from China's National Institute for South China Sea Studies blamed the Philippine ship, calling its maneuver reckless and dangerous. But others ask, why was a Chinese warship even in a position to be rammed by its own Coast Guard vessel? To be sure, this isn't just about one accident. It's about the growing instability in one of the world's busiest and most contested waterways. The South China Sea sees over a third of global shipping traffic, and now it's seeing a sharp uptick in aggressive behavior, not just from the rival nations, but from within China's own maritime forces. So, what happens next? Will China reevaluate its command structure at sea? Will tensions reignite conflict? Or will this be swept under the carpet in Beijing's carefully controlled media landscape? And for the Philippines, a smaller power standing up to a joint, how long can it hold the line? One thing is clear, the South China Sea remains a tinderbox, and this latest incident has added fuel to the fire. Ragini Sudhir Chore for DD India.
If all goes as planned, India could soon join a select club of countries capable of exporting solar energy via an undersea cable. India is in advanced talks with Singapore to transport solar energy through the Bay of Bengal and the Andaman Sea. Today, Australia is the only other country that's working on an undersea cable for selling solar energy. Ragini Sudhir Chore reports.
India is stepping into a new era of global leadership, not just in diplomacy or economy, but in sustainable energy. In a move that could redefine energy trade in Asia, India and Singapore are in the process of finalizing an ambitious undersea cable project to transmit solar power across borders. In a first-of-its-kind collaboration, India and Singapore are planning to lay an undersea cable that will not only carry solar energy from between the two countries, but also enable high-speed data connectivity. Discussions on this project have been ongoing, with notable progress reported during the third India-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable held in New Delhi on August 13. The idea is simple but revolutionary. Today, undersea cables carry 95% of the global internet traffic. They transmit everything from emails and video calls to $10 trillion in daily financial transactions. India aims to add solar energy to that list, transforming undersea cables into conduits of power, both literal and geopolitical, and also connecting the world's solar-rich regions via high-voltage undersea cable. This bold initiative could place India at the heart of a clean energy revolution and help it become a true global power and rewrite the rules of international energy trade. It is also about influence, infrastructure, and India's place in a changing global power map. It's also a win-win proposition for both India and Singapore. Singapore faces land scarcity and limited potential for domestic renewable energy, making imports via regional power grids a key strategy to meet its Paris Agreement commitments. And India, with its abundant renewable energy resources, is positioned to export green energy, including solar, green ammonia, and green hydrogen to Singapore. Indian territories lying in the path of the undersea cable would also stand to benefit from this project. They will get improved access to renewable energy and digital connectivity. The technical groundwork is already in motion. India's Power Grid Corporation, a state-owned entity, is conducting detailed feasibility studies for the project. The cables could be laid via the Bay of Bengal and the Andaman Sea. Alternative routes are also being studied. Globally, Australia and the United Kingdom, along with Sri Lanka, have explored similar ambitions, but no country has yet executed the transmission of solar power via undersea cable. A large-scale solar power project in Australia plans to export electricity to Singapore via a 4,300-kilometer long undersea cable. The project, named Australia Asia Power Link, will involve constructing a large solar farm in the Northern Territory of Australia and transmitting the generated electricity to Singapore. The Australia to Singapore link may become operational by 2027. India is now racing to catch up and potentially lead. The Singapore project fits into India's broader vision of One Sun, One World, One Grid initiative, which was unveiled under its presidency of the International Solar Alliance. The One Sun, One World, One Grid project works on the idea that solar energy can be sent across high voltage direct cables across continents, even from under the ocean to needy countries. It envisages India at the center of the solar spectrum, flanked by two broad zones: the Far East, which includes Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia, and the Far West, which covers West Asia and Africa. For India, it's only the beginning. It is also in advanced talks with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman to establish green energy corridors. If successful, these efforts will create an interconnected web of renewable power trading with India at the center. Singapore is betting big on India. It is keen on ramping up its investments with primary focus on advanced manufacturing such as semiconductors, industrial parks, and also skilled training. It announced a $4.6 billion investment recently. Export of green ammonia and green hydrogen from India to Singapore is another proposal that the two sides are looking at as part of an overall approach to further expand their bilateral ties. Singapore companies have poured capital into Indian infrastructure too. PSA's container terminal at Navi Mumbai and Capital Land's new data centers are good examples of that. Singapore is also keen to invest in India's green energy ports. A Singapore firm has also invested in the port at Thoothukudi in Tamil Nadu. A similar MOU was also signed with the government of Odisha earlier this year. This isn't just about two nations connecting through cables. It's about building shared futures with clean energy, technological cooperation, and economic resilience at the core. In a world reshaped by climate change and geopolitical flux, India is positioning itself not just as a market or a manufacturing hub, but as a global green energy leader. With energy, technology, and diplomacy all wired into this one project, the India-Singapore Solar Link is more than infrastructure. It's an instrument of transformation. And as the world watches, India could be setting the standard for the clean energy partnerships of tomorrow. Ragini Sudhir Chaurya's report for DD India.
And it's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.